Are you interested in saving the environment? Because if you are, you should play Resto Druid in Dragonflight Alpha, since the talents make this tree amazing, and that is what we will be talking about today in today's coverage of Resto Druid with the current Alpha Dragonflight talents, which is not that bad as I would have initially suspected. So before we go into it, a quick shout out to our amazing patrons for supporting all the videos that we do and making all of this content possible, since we are posting daily and it is a lot of work and we couldn't have done it without you. And if you, dear viewer, like what we do and you want to support us a little bit more and you want to see more of this in the future, not only just daily coverages of Alpha Dragonfly with all the specs and everything that's happening there, but also our streams on twitch.tv/Marcelian&Flame and our podcasts on our Mocast channel, and of course the class guides and the TLFs and all of that. If you like this content and you want to see more of it, it would help us a lot if you would check our Patreon page down below. Obviously, any contribution is more than appreciated. We are very grateful for all the support that we've been provided with by our patrons. Plus, if you do decide to become one of our patrons, you will have access to a couple of cool stuff, like, you know, personalized wallpapers with your favorite character. And of course, our monthly chats with the patrons. You'll be able to get there and talk with us directly and talk about, you know, potential video ideas, and be involved in the creative process and talk about WoW in general and just nerd out like we're supposed to do, because we're gamers. That and a bunch of other stuff in our Patreon page. So once again, thank you very much, and let's get into the video and talk about the talents for Resto Druid, since that's pretty much what we have to talk about, since obviously numbers and performance and all of that is always subject to change. But in terms of talent, I went into Resto Druid a little bit dismayed, since I knew it had some problems, but I was not that disappointed as I thought I was. Firstly, let's check the general talent tree, which is, if you've seen our bear, I believe, and I think we also did Boomy, the general talent tree is basically split into 4 potential columns. The first path being the feral path, let's say, which opens up cat weaving for you, and maybe one of the most important one, Skull Bash, which is the interrupt that you will have as Resto Druid, similar to, you know, Resto Shaman that has been so far, and maybe other healers as well that will have interrupts. And Skull Bash is a melee interrupt which will have a very short cooldown, which is great for Resto Druid. Moving also slightly to the right, you'll see the Bear Path, which gives you defensives and unites with Feral for utility, and all the way at the bottom for the Furor Capstone, which is a little bit underwhelming for a capstone, but likely only really Resto will be able to take advantage of it. We'll see exactly how that functions. Right now, you know, you can use it, but the duration of the Furor buffs is so short. If you're not packing a lot of mastery, you're probably going to be losing a lot of it. And moving to the right-hand side of the general Druid tree, you'll notice your Resto tree, which gives you a lot of utility actually, and a lot of some of the more mandatory Resto Druid healing throughput spells, like Improve Rejuvenation, which is probably going to be mandatory considering it increases the duration of rejuvenation by 3 seconds. And it's right below Wild Growth, which is more often than not also mandatory for your Resto Druid kit, so it kind of locks you into those particular 2. Not only that, but you do have access to, you know, the Decurse, the Soothe, the Reset with the Wild Charge, which is in the middle of the tree, which is okay, but we'll talk about that later on. It all coalesces down at the bottom with a Heart of the Wild pick, which is particularly good for Resto, since when you are Resto, you will want to take the most advantage out of the other specs as well, since if you don't have anything to heal, you might want to be a cat or a chicken or a bear. You should probably not need to be a bear, because if you need to be a bear, shit has hit the fan big time. But you do have that option, and Heart of the Wild works similarly as it does right now in Shadowlands. And of course, there are a couple of interesting points going towards it, which are a little bit weird, because Soothe is kind of mandatory to get Stampeding Roar, which is weird because Soothe might not be important all over in every content, every dungeon, every raid boss, but you will have to pick it because in every encounter, Stampeding Roar is useful. So again, that's not much of a choice. This is maybe my only big problem with the talent tree. If this can be rectified, maybe move some Soothe some other way, maybe make it a choice between Soothe and Stampeding Roar. Obviously, that would skew a little bit the points required to advance through the next talent gate, but they've been doing a pretty good job so far. So I'm hoping that we don't see this restriction during the actual release of Dragonflight. Now, on the right-hand side, you will see the balance column, which unlocks, obviously, Owl Weaving, if that's your jam. It's not mine, I like peanut butter, but I digress. You do have access to Typhoon and Cyclone and Ursol's Vortex and Mass Entanglement and Innervate, and you see a pattern here that most of the good stuff is in the balance tree, which is something that hasn't changed much or at all since the initial release of the Dragonflight talents, and that's a little bit shitty since these are probably the best utility options that you can get, and they're all kind of dead ends, right? They're not restricting you from advancing further into the tree. You don't need to unlock some weird stuff to get to them. They're pretty accessible. This is maybe the better part of the talent tree, considering that you can get all of this. And of course, you have a capstone there as well, which is the Nature's Vigil, which is a new capstone that makes it so that when you activate it, when you do damage, you heal a nearby target. It's kind of like Ancestral Guidance for Resto Shaman and Vampiric Embrace for Priest. It's only on one target, but who knows? Otherwise, you'll probably want Innervate, at least in raids, since, you know, that's kind of your thing. Plus, you have an improved Innervate talent in your normal Resto Druid tree, also seemingly on the raid-oriented side of the tree. So at least that's kind of nailed, since you probably won't need an Innervate in dungeons. So yeah, I guess that's good. And moving into the Spec Tree, it's also, again, remarkably fine. Although it could probably use some tweaks. It's pretty bare bones at the very top, but then again, you know, I guess that's not that bad considering what you have at the bottom, which we will get to in a second. First of all, tuning is definitely off, and that's always subject to change as we're getting close to the release of Dragonflight. Usually the bigger tuning changes will be done just before the release, which is not something that we should judge a spec by, but it should be something that we expect. Flourish still feels a little bit weird because it's a big button. It's supposed to be super impressive, but it barely does the same amount of damage as a buffed up regrowth with Soul of the Forest with all of your hots up, which is, I mean, that's still a lot of healing and you can chain them back to back, but I mean, is that what you're telling it for? Is that what you want? Shouldn't it be like this explosive, like, oh my god, I have a couple of hots, this takes advantage of my mastery threefold, let's fucking explode, let's do a lay on hands, right? And it's also pretty expensive in terms of mana cost, so we'll see. It's not that bad, but it's not as impressive as you might be led to believe by, you know, pathing towards it. And as you path towards the bottom side of the tree, you have 7 capstones. Did you hear that? I said 7. You heard me, right? It was 7, and 2 of them are choice nodes, so essentially you have 9 capstones. This is the only spec that has that many capstones, and if you talent properly towards the bottom side of the tree, you can essentially pick 5 of these suckers. 5 of these suckers. That is particularly cool because each of them are pretty unique and they change the playstyle slightly, and the versatility in types of builds that you can make with your Resto Druid are so fucking... It's good, man. This is basically right up my alley when it comes to playing a spec. I want to feel like I have some versatility, like I change a couple of things and I play totally different, I do different things, keeps it fresh, keeps it interesting, keeps it engaging, and that's probably what most of us want, right? We need to be engaged in our spec, and this is very, very amazing. I sincerely hope they don't remove this because they're not overtly overpowered or anything like that, and you cannot really get any 5 combination, I don't think, since prior to getting to this, you do have Adaptive Swarm, which you will recognize, and the capstone for it is a buff to Adaptive Swarm, which is sure. And you do have Convoke, which obviously every druid spec should have Convoke forever, for eternity. And Convoke is actually on choice nodes also, that, you know, can give you more options into building your druid. Plus, you will recognize your 4-set build and most of the Shadowlands legendaries, which Circle of Life and Death, which is all the way to the left-hand side, is a 2.0. So they are adding a little bit of restrictions as to which or how many capstone nodes you will get, but you do have options, and that's particularly fun, and that's a big plus in my book. And since we talked about the talent tree overall, in the middle, as fairly consistent with all of the specs, you will have your main cooldowns like Tranquility and stuff like that. And moving towards each side, you'll see a different side of your playstyle. Specifically to the right hand side, you'll see a lot of buffs to Iron Bark, which kind of hint towards a lot of tank healing, so likely this is where your raid options will probably come from, and you do have improved Rejuvenate there as well, which is also something that you will use in raids more often than not. While on the left hand side you have probably your Mythic Plus routes with your Wild Growths and all of that Life Bloom Cleaves and stuff like that, which is also really nice. And you know, going all the way down, you'll notice Photosynthesis there being one of the capstones, and vice versa for the raid build Flourish, which has been, although it's being used right now in dungeons, which has it has historically been a raid cooldown. So there is some consistency to the Resto Druid talent tree, which I particularly like, and of course there's build diversity, which I am so happy for, because it sucks to feel restricted, and it's nice to feel like, ooh, I can get this and this and this and this and this, and it feels like Christmas, all right? It feels like Christmas. Overall, my impressions of the Resto Druid talent tree is particularly positive. I've had a lot of fun, even though a bunch of stuff isn't working still right now in alpha, but it is alpha. The potential that it has is really cool, and I like that they're taking a bigger risk rather, and having all these capstones that you can choose from, making the build or the spec in general a lot more interesting. And I'm excited to see how this will all turn out once Dragonflight will be released, so stay tuned on our channel, because we will be covering everything that we can get our greedy little fingers on in the alpha for Dragonflight. And hope you liked the video. Once again, if you like our content, please consider supporting us on our Patreon page down below. Any contribution is more than appreciated. Thank you for watching the video. See you next time. Bye bye.
I've been loving it then, I still love it now. Still, I play WoW. Still, I play WoW. Getting better every day, let me show you how. Cause still, I play WoW. Still, I play WoW. It's getting harder to stay, but at the end of the day, it's a guilty pleasure, so just log in and play. Whether it's classical retail, I'ma do a /bow. Still, I play WoW.